He cheated and brought her into our bed, so I sold it and bought their wedding venue. My husband spent $47,000 of our money on his 25-year-old mistress, brought her into our bed, and planned to marry her at a venue that cost more than most people's cars. So I bought the venue and canceled their wedding. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a 68-year-old mathematics teacher became the kind of woman who destroys cheating husbands with a checkbook and a smile. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength to speak my truth. Now let's get into my story. My name is Ruby Washington, and 3 years ago I thought my biggest problem was high blood pressure medication. I was wrong. My biggest problem was coming home early on a Tuesday morning and hearing another woman's laughter floating down from my bedroom like a death sentence wrapped in silk. The sound hit me first. Laughter, female laughter that wasn't mine, floating down from upstairs like a slap across my face. Then voices, his deep rumble mixed with something high and musical, something young. I stood frozen in my own foyer, my purse clutched in my arthritic hands, listening to my husband of 43 years entertaining another woman in our bedroom, in the bed where I'd nursed him through pneumonia, where we'd conceived our 3 children, where I'd held him when his mother passed. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed them. Each step felt like walking toward my own execution. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside, and what I saw burned itself into my memory like a brand. Marcus, my Marcus, sitting on the edge of our mahogany sleigh bed, the one we'd saved for 3 years to buy, feeding strawberries to a girl who couldn't have been older than 25. Her dark skin glowed with youth, her natural hair styled in perfect coils that framed a face that had never known disappointment. She was beautiful, devastatingly, mockingly beautiful, and she was wearing my robe, the silk one Marcus had given me for our anniversary just last year. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. They never saw me. They were too wrapped up in their little paradise, built on the ashes of my trust. That night, I made my first decision. I wouldn't confront them yet. I would watch, I would learn, and then I would destroy them both. Because here's what 43 years of marriage teaches you. Patience is a weapon, silence is strategy, and a woman who's been underestimated her entire life has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The next few weeks turned me into a detective in my own home, cataloging evidence of his betrayal with the methodical precision I'd once used as a high school mathematics teacher. Every receipt, every text message, every lie became ammunition for the war I was secretly preparing. Her name was Destiny Williams, 25 years old, a paralegal at the law firm where Marcus worked as a janitor. The irony was crushing. After years of me encouraging him to reach for something better, he'd found his motivation in impressing a woman half his age. The affair had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of late nights at the office, weekend conferences that didn't exist, and sudden interest in buying new cologne. 8 months of me cooking dinner for a man who was already full from feeding another woman's appetite. They'd been meeting at our house on Tuesdays and Thursdays, my bridge club days. She'd been in my kitchen, using my dishes, sitting at my table. The violation felt complete, but it was the text messages that shattered something inside me permanently. I found them on a Tuesday night when Marcus fell asleep watching television, his phone buzzing beside him like an insistent fly. "Can't wait to wake up next to you every morning," she'd written. "This sneaking around is getting old. When are you going to choose me?" His response typed on the phone I'd given him for Christmas. "Soon, baby." Very soon. Ruby's getting older. more set in her ways. It won't be long now. I sat in our darkened living room, holding that phone, reading my own death sentence written in blue text bubbles. More set in my ways, as if loving your husband faithfully for 4 decades was a character flaw. That night, I started planning, not my breakdown, my comeback. I discovered they were planning a romantic weekend in Traverse City, using money from our joint account. Marcus had told me he'd be visiting his sick brother, another lie to add to my growing collection. As I fell asleep that night, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Marcus thought he was playing chess, but I was about to teach him the rules of war. That Friday evening, as Marcus packed his overnight bag for his trip to visit his sick brother, I watched from the kitchen doorway with the satisfaction of a chess player who could see checkmate 6 moves ahead. Drive safe, I told him, my voice honey sweet. Give Raymond my best. He kissed my cheek, actually kissed my cheek, before heading out with his weekend bag and guilty conscience. The audacity was breathtaking. I waited exactly 30 minutes before renting a pearl white Cadillac Escalade and driving toward Traverse City, armed with their cabin's address and a plan that would either cure Marcus of his midlife crisis or accelerate it beyond repair. The cabin was exactly what I'd expected, a quaint love nest overlooking the bay. I parked the Escalade right next to Marcus's old Ford pickup and walked up to the front window. Through the gauzy curtains, I could see them on the couch, her head on his shoulder, while some romantic movie played. I didn't knock. I didn't break down the door. Instead, I did something far more devastating. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Click. Marcus feeding her popcorn. Click. Her feet in his lap while he massaged them. Click. Him kissing her forehead while she smiled up adoringly. Each photograph was evidence for my divorce attorney. But more than that, they were proof of exactly how little our marriage had meant to him. The photograph that broke my heart and strengthened my resolve was the last one. Marcus standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the water with an expression of pure contentment I hadn't seen on his face in years. That's when I understood the full scope of his betrayal. He hadn't just cheated on me. He'd checked out of our marriage entirely. I was the obligation. She was the joy. I saved the photographs and drove to a charming bed and breakfast, where I booked myself a room. If Marcus could have a romantic weekend on our money, so could I. I spent Saturday exploring Traverse City like a tourist, buying myself expensive dinners and designer clothes I'd never have splurged on before. Every purchase was an act of rebellion, a declaration of independence from the frugal mindset that had governed our entire marriage. Sunday morning, I arrived home before Marcus's truck pulled into our driveway. I was sitting on the porch when he walked up, car keys jingling, that same guilty expression he'd worn for months. "How was Raymond?" I asked pleasantly. "Better," he lied without missing a beat. "Much better." I nodded and smiled, watching him lie to my face with practiced ease. "I'm glad to hear it. We should visit him together soon." The panic that flickered across his features was almost comical. That's when I knew Marcus had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I waited 2 more weeks, gathering strength and strategy like a general preparing for war. When I finally chose my moment, it was deliberate and calculated. They were in our bed again, a Tuesday, predictable as sunrise. This time, I didn't sneak upstairs. I walked up those steps with purpose, my footsteps announcing my arrival like drum beats. I pushed the bedroom door open wide and stood there, filling the doorframe with 43 years of righteous anger. Destiny scrambled to cover herself with my Egyptian cotton sheets. Marcus jumped up so fast he nearly fell, his face cycling through surprise, guilt, and finally, defiance. "Ruby, I can explain." "No need," I said, my voice steady as stone. I can see perfectly well what needs explaining. Destiny found her voice first, which impressed me. Mrs. Washington, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Find out what way would have been better? I asked, genuinely curious. A text message? A letter? Perhaps you preferred I discover my husband's affair with some dignity intact? Marcus stepped forward, pulling on his boxers. Ruby, let's talk about this downstairs. Destiny, you should go. Oh, Destiny should go? I laughed, a sound that surprised even me. But Marcus, according to your text messages, I'm the one who should be going. I'm getting older, more set in my ways. Isn't that what you told her? The color drained from his face. You went through my phone? I went through everything, Marcus. Bank statements, credit card bills, restaurant receipts. Did you know you spent $800 on jewelry last month? I thought it was for me. Imagine my disappointment. Destiny was dressing quickly now, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. 43 years, I continued, my voice never rising above conversational level. 43 years of washing your clothes, cooking your meals, raising your children, and this is how it ends? In the bed I picked out, with a woman young enough to be our granddaughter. Marcus finally found his courage. Ruby, I love her. I'm sorry you're hurt, but I love her. I haven't felt this alive in years. There it was, the truth served plain, without garnish or apology. I see, I said. Well then, you'd better start figuring out where you're going to feel alive, because this house belongs to me. The look on Marcus's face was worth every sleepless night I'd endured. Pure, unfiltered shock painted his features as reality began to dawn. What do you mean the house belongs to you? He stammered. I smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd felt in weeks. Oh, Marcus, for someone who's been playing games for 8 months, you really didn't think this through, did you? The house is in my name only. Remember when your credit was destroyed during that gambling phase 15 years ago? We put everything in my name, the mortgage, the deed, all of it. The memory was clearly surfacing in his mind, his face growing paler with each passing second. Pack your things, I said finally. Both of you. You have until Sunday. Ruby, it's Mrs. Washington to you now, and this conversation is over. The house felt like a crime scene after they left, but I didn't have time to mourn. I had work to do. I called my children first, Denise in Atlanta, Jerome locally, and Marcia in Chicago. 3 conversations, 3 different reactions. Denise's protective anger, Jerome's disbelief, Marcia's tears. But all 3 offered the same thing, unwavering support for their mother and cold fury toward their father. Mama, Jerome said, his voice tight with controlled rage, what do you need from us? Money? A lawyer? You just say the word. I need you to remember that this isn't your fight, I told him. This is between your father and me. You children stay out of it. Let the adults handle adult business. But privately, I felt a warm glow of satisfaction knowing my children stood firmly in my corner. Marcus had lost more than a wife. He'd lost the respect of the 3 best things we'd ever created together. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I went through every financial document in our house with the focused intensity of an IRS auditor. What I found shocked even me. We were wealthy. The retirement accounts alone totaled nearly $800,000. The house was worth $320,000. Our savings, money market funds, and my mother's inheritance, it all added up to over $1 million. $1 million that I'd helped accumulate through decades of careful spending, coupon clipping, and making every dollar stretch. Money I'd thought we were saving for our golden years together. I called Sharon Martinez, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in family law. We'd met at church, and I'd always admired her no nonsense approach to life. Ruby, she said after I'd explained the situation, I need you to understand something very important. In Michigan, assets acquired during marriage are generally considered marital property, even if they're in one person's name. My heart sank. So he gets half of everything? Not necessarily. There are exceptions, especially in cases involving adultery and abandonment. Plus, the house being in your sole name gives us significant leverage, and Ruby? Her voice took on a steely edge. If he's been spending marital funds on this affair, we can demand reimbursement. Those restaurant receipts suddenly became very valuable evidence. What I need you to do, Sharon continued, is gather every piece of financial documentation you can find. We're going to build a picture of exactly what this marriage is worth and what he's taken from it. I spent the next 3 days becoming an archaeologist of my own life, digging through filing cabinets and desk drawers. What emerged was clear. I'd been the responsible one, the saver, the planner. Marcus had been the spender, especially in recent months. But the most interesting discovery was a document I found tucked away in Marcus's desk drawer. A vacation rental agreement for a cabin in Traverse City, booked for this coming weekend. I smiled as I added it to my growing pile of evidence. Marcus was about to learn that lying to your wife of 43 years had consequences he'd never imagined. By Thursday, Sharon was ready to file papers. But first, we had one more strategic move to make. I chose Friday afternoon to have Marcus served with divorce papers, timing it perfectly for maximum impact. Not at home where he could process the shock privately, but at his workplace in front of his colleagues, the same building where he'd first met Destiny Williams. Sharon's process server was a no-nonsense woman named Patricia who understood the psychological impact of her job. But this time, I wanted to witness it myself. I positioned myself across the street from the law firm, wearing sunglasses and sitting in my car like some suburban spy. At exactly 3 p.m., I watched Patricia enter the building. 20 minutes later, she emerged, followed by a commotion at the third-floor windows. I could see faces pressed against the glass, lawyers and staff craning their necks to get a better view of whatever drama was unfolding inside. My phone rang. Patricia's voice was triumphant. He was emptying trash cans when I found him. Professional as always, I announced myself clearly. Marcus Washington, you've been served with divorce papers. The man just stood there holding a garbage bag, mouth hanging open like a fish. She paused, clearly enjoying the memory. But the best part was the audience. Half the law firm was watching from their office doorways. Word spreads fast in a place like that. I could picture it perfectly. Marcus in his janitor's uniform, holding divorce papers in one hand and a trash bag in the other, while lawyers and paralegals whispered among themselves. The humiliation was public, complete, and entirely of his own making. Within an hour, my phone was ringing. Ruby, what the hell is this? His voice was shaking with fury and disbelief. It's a divorce petition, Marcus, filed on grounds of adultery with a demand for asset division that reflects your misconduct during our marriage. You can't just throw away 43 years like this. The irony was staggering. I didn't throw away anything, Marcus. You did that when you brought your girlfriend into our bed. That afternoon, while Marcus was processing the worst news of his life, I was taking care of business. I called Rothschild Antiques, the upscale furniture store where we'd bought our mahogany sleigh bed 23 years ago. Mrs. Washington, Mr. Rothschild said after examining the furniture, this is a beautiful set. In today's market, I could sell this for $4,500, maybe $5,000. What would you pay me for it today? $3,000 cash, and I'll have my men come pick it up this afternoon. $3,000. Not bad for a bed that had been defiled by my husband's adultery. By 5 o'clock, the bedroom was empty except for my grandmother's antique rocking chair. The room felt cleansed, purified by the absence of furniture that held too many painful memories. But the bed was just the beginning. That evening, I researched wedding venues in the Detroit metropolitan area, armed with information Destiny had foolishly shared during one of her panicked phone calls. They were planning to marry at Meadowbrook Manor, an elegant estate venue, a venue that cost $15,000 for a wedding reception, according to their website. I picked up my phone and dialed their number. "Good evening," I said, my voice warm and professional. "I'm interested in purchasing your venue. Not renting, purchasing outright." My plan was taking shape, and it was more beautiful than any wedding Destiny Williams would ever have. Robert Hartwell was a practical businessman who understood that unexpected opportunities sometimes arrived in unlikely packages. When a well-dressed 68-year-old woman walked into his office Monday morning with a certified check for $400,000 and an offer to buy his wedding venue outright, he listened carefully. "Mrs. Washington," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, "I have to ask, why do you want to buy Meadowbrook Manor?" I smiled, appreciating his directness. "Mr. Hartwell, let's just say I have a very personal interest in controlling who gets married at your venue and who doesn't. The property is worth about $350,000 according to the last appraisal," he continued. "But the business itself, with all the bookings and contracts, I'm offering $400,000 cash with a 60-day closing," I interrupted. "And I want all existing contracts honored through the end of this year. After that, I'll be restructuring the business." Robert was quiet for a long moment. Finally, "Mrs. Washington, you have a deal." We shook hands across his desk, and I felt a surge of satisfaction that was almost intoxicating. In one morning, I'd gone from betrayed wife to property owner, with the power to control people's wedding dreams. That afternoon, I called Destiny Williams at the law firm. "Destiny, this is Ruby Washington. I wanted to congratulate you on your upcoming wedding. Meadowbrook Manor is such a lovely choice." "How do you know about that?" she whispered. "Word travels in small communities. But I'm calling because I've heard the most interesting rumor about the venue. Something about new ownership." "What are you talking about?" "Oh, you haven't heard? Meadowbrook Manor was sold today. Cash sale, very quick transaction. I do hope the new owner honors existing contracts, but you know how these things go when ownership changes hands." I could practically hear her pulse racing through the phone. "Who bought it?" "Someone with very particular standards about the kind of events they're willing to host. Someone who believes in the sanctity of marriage and has strong feelings about adultery." "You didn't," she breathed. "I did indeed, and I'm looking forward to reviewing all the existing contracts very carefully." I hung up before she could respond, then immediately called Robert back. "Robert, I need you to pull the Washington Williams contract, scheduled for October 15th. The contract made for fascinating reading. They'd booked the premium package, full venue rental, garden ceremony, ballroom reception, catering for 150 guests. Total cost, $18,500, with a $5,000 deposit already paid from our joint savings account. My money, used to finance their celebration of destroying my marriage. I studied the contract carefully, paying special attention to the cancellation clause. Any cancellation initiated by the venue required 30 days' notice and full refund of deposits, unless the cancellation was due to violations of the venue's moral standards clause. Every contract had a moral standards clause, apparently. a little used provision that allowed the venue to refuse service to parties whose behavior conflicted with the establishment's values. Robert, I've reviewed the Washington Williams contract, and I'm invoking the Moral Standards Clause. I need you to cancel their booking immediately. Mrs. Washington, are you sure about this? The Moral Standards Clause is rarely used. Trust me, Robert. I have documented evidence that this couple's relationship began as an extramarital affair while Mr. Washington was married to another woman. That violates any reasonable definition of moral standards. You're right, he said finally. The clause specifically mentions adultery as grounds for cancellation. I'll draft the letter today. Make sure to include the specific reason for cancellation in writing. And, Robert, I want you to personally deliver this letter to Ms. Williams at her workplace. That evening, my phone rang exactly at 6:47 p.m. Marcus's voice was tight with panic. Ruby, what did you do? The wedding venue canceled our booking because of moral standards violations. I settled into my new rocking chair, the only piece of furniture I'd kept from the old bedroom, and smiled. I told them the truth, that you're an adulterer who began your relationship with your fiancé while married to another woman. Apparently, they have standards about that sort of thing. You bought the venue? His voice cracked. I did indeed. Lovely property, really. I can see why you chose it for your special day. Ruby, this is insane. You can't buy an entire business just to ruin our wedding. I didn't buy it to ruin your wedding, Marcus. I bought it because I could. Because after 43 years of marriage, I deserve to spend my money on whatever makes me happy. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. What do you want? He finally asked. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that betraying someone who loved you for 4 decades comes with a price tag you can't afford. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine, toasting my empty house and my full bank account. Tomorrow I would start planning what to do with my beautiful new wedding venue. The next morning brought a conference call I'd never imagined having. All three of my children on the line together, their voices mixing admiration with disbelief. Mama, Denise said, her voice bright with fierce laughter. Jerome told us you bought a wedding venue just to cancel Daddy's wedding. Please tell me that's true. It's true, baby, though I prefer to think of it as making a real estate investment with excellent fringe benefits. Mama, you are officially my hero, Denise continued. I can't believe you actually did that. Jerome's voice was more cautious. Mama, people are talking. Word is spreading about what you did to Dad's wedding. Good, I replied simply. Let them talk. But don't you think this might be going too far? I mean, buying an entire business just to… Jerome, honey, let me ask you something. If someone stole $50,000 from your bank account to spend on another woman, what would you do? I'd call the police. Exactly. Your father stole from our marriage, from our family, from the life we built together. The police can't arrest him for adultery, but they can't stop me from using my legal rights to protect what's mine, either. Marcia's voice was pure steel. Mama, I heard what you did today. I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. For years, we watched you make yourself smaller, so Daddy could feel bigger. You cooked what he wanted, watched the shows he liked, went along with his plans. And this whole time, he was planning to replace you with someone half your age. Her voice broke slightly. You deserve better than that. You deserve to take up space, to make noise, to fight back. And if buying a wedding venue to ruin his day is what it takes, then I say buy 2 venues. That evening brought the best call of the day from an unexpected source. My granddaughter, Keisha, Denise's 20-year-old daughter. Grandma Ruby, she said, her young voice bubbling with excitement. Mom told me what you did to Granddad's wedding. I just want you to know that you're like legendary now. My friends can't believe my grandmother is such a savage. A savage? It's a compliment, Grandma. It means you're fierce, that you don't take any nonsense from anybody. You're like the coolest grandmother ever. I hung up that call feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Pride, not just in what I'd accomplished, but in who I was becoming. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. Through my network of church friends and former colleagues, I learned he and Destiny were scrambling desperately to find a replacement venue. The wedding was only 6 weeks away, and most quality locations were booked solid for peak October season. According to Margaret from my old bridge club, they'd inquired at Fairlane Manor but balked at the $25,000 price tag, nearly $7,000 more than they'd budgeted. Financial reality was setting in for the happy couple, and I was just getting started. Meanwhile, I was discovering the unexpected pleasures of business ownership. Robert Hartwell stayed on as manager, and together we began reviewing the venue's operations. Mrs. Washington, he explained as we walked through the gardens, we host about 40 weddings per year, plus corporate events. The profit margin is good, especially during wedding season. What about expanding our screening process? I asked. Background checks, character references, that sort of thing? Robert looked amused. You really want to make sure we only host couples with pristine reputations? I want to make sure we only host couples who respect the institution of marriage, I corrected. There's a difference. But the real satisfaction came 3 days later when Destiny Williams appeared at my front door. She looked smaller than I remembered, younger and more fragile, without the armor of righteous indignation. Mrs. Washington, she said when I opened the door, may I come in, please? I studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. She entered my living room like someone walking into a museum, taking in the family photographs, the accumulated evidence of a life built over decades. I've been thinking about what you told me, she said, sitting carefully on the edge of my sofa. About the money. I didn't know he was lying about your finances. I settled into my rocking chair, waiting. He told me you were well off. He said you had plenty of money, that you were stingy and refused to spend it on anything fun. He made it sound like you were hoarding wealth while he worked hard to support an ungrateful wife. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him, she admitted. It made everything easier, made me feel less guilty about accepting expensive gifts and dinners. She looked around the room again, her eyes stopping on a photograph of Marcus and me at our 40th anniversary celebration. You look happy in that picture. We were happy. For 40 years, we were genuinely happy. Mrs. Washington, I need to tell you something about Marcus and about our relationship. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. He's been lying to me too. When the venue canceled our wedding, he promised we'd find something even better. But when I asked how we'd pay for it, he got angry. He told me I was being materialistic. She took a shaky breath. Yesterday, I found out he's been lying about his salary too. He told me he made $60,000 a year, that you just controlled all the money. But when I saw his actual pay stubs, I realized he makes less than I do. The pieces were falling into place for her, just as they had for me months earlier. He's not the successful man he pretended to be, she continued. He's not even the honest man he pretended to be. And I'm starting to think the only reason he wanted to marry me was to prove he could replace you with someone younger. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for this young woman who was discovering what I'd learned too late, that Marcus Washington was very good at being whoever he needed to be to get what he wanted. So, what are you going to do now? I asked. Destiny looked me straight in the eye for the first time since she'd arrived. I'm going to break up with him. Today, and Mrs. Washington, I'm sorry for everything, for believing his lies about you, for accepting stolen gifts, for participating in the destruction of your marriage. I can't undo what I did, but I can stop making it worse. She stood to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, you're nothing like he described you. He made you sound bitter and controlling and cold, but you're not any of those things. You're just strong. After she left, I sat in my quiet house for a long time, processing what had just happened. Marcus was about to lose not just his wife, but his mistress too. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Marcus appeared at my door exactly 3 hours after Destiny would have broken up with him. His face was haggard, his clothes wrinkled, and his eyes held the wild desperation of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. She left me, he said without preamble. Destiny left me. I didn't invite him in, but I didn't close the door either. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. You're the reason she left. You poisoned her against me with your lies about money and stealing and… Marcus, I interrupted, my voice calm and steady. I didn't tell her any lies. I told her the truth, the same truth you've been hiding from both of us. He slumped against the door frame, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. She said I was using her to hurt you. That's not true, Ruby. I love her. I really love her. Maybe you do, but you loved yourself more. I stepped aside and let him into the living room, not out of kindness, but because this conversation needed to happen, and it needed to happen properly. It means you loved the way she made you feel more than you loved her as a person. You loved being desired by someone young and beautiful. You loved feeling like you were still attractive, still vital, still worth wanting. Marcus sat heavily on the sofa, his head in his hands. That's not fair. Neither is spending $47,000 of your wife's money on another woman, but here we are. He looked up at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. How did we get here, Ruby? How did 43 years turn into this? I settled into my rocking chair, studying the man I'd loved for most of my adult life. We got here because you decided that what we had wasn't enough anymore. You decided that I wasn't enough anymore. You took me for granted, Marcus. You turned me into furniture, something useful that you expected to be there, but never really saw anymore. And when someone new came along who made you feel special, you threw away 43 years like it was garbage. I made mistakes, he said quietly. I know that now. But Ruby, we could still fix this. We could try counseling, work things out. No, I said firmly. We can't. Because you didn't just have an affair, Marcus. You had a relationship. You built a life with her using resources stolen from our life. You brought her into our bed, made plans to marry her, replaced me completely before you even told me I was being replaced. I leaned forward, making sure he heard every word. An affair is a mistake. What you did was a calculated betrayal that lasted 8 months. There's a difference. Marcus was crying now, tears streaming down his face, like a child who'd finally understood the magnitude of his transgression. I lost everything, he whispered. My wife, my girlfriend, my home, my children's respect. I lost everything, Ruby. Yes, I agreed. You did. The question is, was she worth it? He couldn't answer, which was answer enough. I stood up, signaling that our conversation was over. The divorce papers are proceeding as planned. Sharon will contact you about the final settlement. Other than that, we have nothing more to discuss. Mrs. Washington, I corrected. That's Mrs. Washington to you now. He left without another word, and I locked the door behind him. 43 years of marriage ended in my living room on a Thursday afternoon. I should have felt sadder about it. Instead, I felt relieved. The asset disclosure process revealed the true scope of Marcus's betrayal in stark numerical terms. Sharon's forensic accountant, a meticulous woman named Dr. Rosalind Price, had spent 2 weeks dissecting our financial records with surgical precision. Mrs. Washington, Dr. Price explained as she laid out spreadsheets across Sharon's conference table, your husband has spent approximately $47,000 of marital funds on this affair over the past 8 months. The number hit me like a physical blow. $47,000, nearly twice his annual take-home pay, spent on romantic dinners, jewelry, weekend getaways, and gifts for a woman who'd contributed nothing to our marriage. This includes restaurant charges that clearly exceed normal spending patterns, she continued, pointing to highlighted sections. Hotel rooms, vacation rentals, expensive jewelry purchases, and what appears to be a shopping spree at Nordstrom, $3,200 in a single day. I remembered that day. Marcus had told me he was working overtime, collecting extra shifts to help with our retirement savings. Instead, he'd been buying his mistress a wardrobe with money I'd helped save through decades of careful budgeting. Dr. Price slid another document across the table. There's also this, a joint credit card Marcus opened without your knowledge, using your shared credit history. He's run up $23,000 in charges, all affair-related expenses. My hands trembled as I reviewed the statements. Expensive lingerie from Victoria's Secret, wine tastings in Napa Valley, a trip I dreamed of taking with him for our 40th anniversary, a $4,000 weekend at a luxury resort in Mackinac Island. Each charge was a betrayal compounded, a financial violation that went far beyond mere adultery. Can we make him responsible for the full amount of this debt? I asked. Absolutely, Sharon replied, since it was incurred through fraud, using your credit without your knowledge for non-marital purposes, he'll be solely liable for repayment. That evening, I called my children to update them on the financial discoveries. The silence that greeted each revelation was profound. Mama, Denise finally said, her voice tight with controlled anger, he stole from you. This isn't just cheating, it's theft. $47,000, Jerome repeated, disbelief evident in his tone. That's more than I make in a year. Marcia was crying openly. All those times he said we couldn't afford family vacations, couldn't help with college expenses, couldn't renovate the kitchen like you wanted, and he was spending our money on her? The children's anger was a balm to my wounded soul. They understood, finally, the scope of their father's betrayal, not just of me, but of our entire family. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a calculator, adding up the true cost of Marcus's midlife crisis: $47,000 in direct expenses, $23,000 in hidden credit card debt, legal fees reaching another $15,000, $85,000. That's what it cost to destroy a 43-year marriage. But as I looked around my house legally and morally, I realized something important. I could afford it. We'd built enough wealth together that even this massive betrayal wouldn't break me financially. I was still standing, still solvent, still strong. Marcus, on the other hand, was about to discover what real financial consequences looked like. 3 months after my divorce was finalized, Meadowbrook Manor had been transformed into something remarkable. What started as a revenge purchase had evolved into a thriving business built on principles I'd learned the hard way: respect, commitment, and the value of keeping promises. But success brought unexpected challenges. One morning, Robert approached me with concern written across his face. Ruby, we have a problem. Riverside Events is spreading rumors about our screening process. They're telling potential clients we're discriminatory, that we're turning away business based on personal vendettas. My blood chilled. Riverside Events was our biggest competitor, owned by a man named Richard Caldwell, who'd been trying to buy Meadowbrook for years. What kind of rumors? I asked. That you bought this place specifically to destroy your ex-husband's wedding. That you're using the business for personal revenge rather than legitimate purposes. I felt my carefully built reputation beginning to crack. Are we losing bookings? 3 cancellations this week, all citing concerns about our stability and professional standards. This was war, and I couldn't let Richard Caldwell destroy what I'd built. That afternoon, I called an emergency meeting with our marketing consultant, Andrea, and Dr. Patricia Williams, our marriage counselor. We're going to turn this attack into our greatest strength, I announced. If they want to talk about our standards, let's show them exactly what those standards achieve. Dr. Williams leaned forward. What do you have in mind? We're going to track every couple who's gotten married here. Follow-up surveys, success rates, testimonials. We're going to prove that our screening process doesn't just exclude bad marriages, it ensures good ones. Andrea's eyes lit up. A success rate study. Brilliant. No other venue has ever done comprehensive marriage outcome tracking. Within 2 weeks, we'd surveyed every couple married at Meadowbrook in the past year. The results were staggering. 100% of our couples reported high marriage satisfaction scores. 95% credited our premarital counseling with strengthening their relationships. 0 divorces among our couples in their first year of marriage. The industry average for first-year divorces was 8%. We published the study in 3 wedding magazines, complete with testimonials from grateful couples. The headline in Michigan Bride read, "The venue that's revolutionizing marriage success." Richard Caldwell's rumors had backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying our reputation, he'd forced us to prove our value in measurable terms. Our booking calendar filled up for the next 2 years. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for upcoming bookings, I came across a familiar name. Jerome Washington, my son, and his longtime girlfriend, Sarah. I called Jerome immediately. Jerome, did you submit an application to book Meadowbrook Manor for your wedding? Yes, ma'am, he said, his voice careful. Sarah and I got engaged last month. We wanted to have our reception at your venue, if you'll have us. Of course I'll have you. You're my son. But Mama, we want to go through the same process as everyone else. The screening, the counseling, all of it. Sarah says if the venue is important enough for you to buy it, then the process is important enough for us to respect it. I felt tears prick my eyes. I'd be honored to host your wedding, baby. The wedding planning process gave me the opportunity to experience Meadowbrook Manor from a completely different perspective, not as the vengeful ex-wife who'd bought a venue to spite her cheating husband, but as a proud mother preparing to celebrate her son's happiness. Sarah was everything I'd hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Intelligent, kind, and completely devoted to Jerome. During our planning meetings, she treated me with perfect balance of respect and warmth. Ruby, she said during one of our consultations, I want you to know how much I admire what you've done here, not just the business, but the principles behind it. Jerome and I want our marriage to reflect those same values. Jerome and Sarah attended our premarital workshop series, where they explored communication styles, financial planning, and conflict resolution. Mama, Jerome told me after their 3rd session, this counseling is incredible. We've talked about things I never would have thought to discuss before marriage. Sarah and I feel more prepared, more intentional about what we're committing to. The guest list became an interesting exercise in family diplomacy. Denise and Marcia were enthusiastic supporters, but the question of Marcus's attendance loomed large. Mama, Jerome said during one planning session, I want Dad there. I know what he did was wrong, and I know it hurt you terribly, but he's still my father, and I want him to see me get married. I'd been expecting this conversation. If you want your father there, then he'll be there. This is your wedding day, not the continuation of my divorce proceedings. But will you be okay with it? I considered the question seriously. Would I be able to maintain my composure sharing the most important day in my son's life with the man who'd betrayed our family? I'll be fine, I said finally, because this day isn't about your father and me. It's about you and Sarah, and your future together. But privately, I was already planning how to handle Marcus's presence at the venue I now owned. He would be treated with the same respect as any other guest. No more, no less. That evening, I called Marcus to tell him about Jerome's engagement. It was the first time we'd spoken since the divorce was finalized. Jerome's getting married, I said without preamble. I thought you should know. That's wonderful news, he said, his voice cautious. When? Where? October 15th, at Meadowbrook Manor. The silence stretched between us. October 15th was the date he and Destiny had originally planned to marry at the same venue. Ruby, he said finally, that's poetic justice? Yes, I thought so too. Will I be invited? I considered the question carefully. That's up to Jerome and Sarah. But if they invite you, and if you attend, you'll be expected to follow the same rules as every other guest: respect, dignity, and appropriate behavior. I understand. Do you, Marcus? Because this isn't about punishment anymore. It's about standards. It's about creating a space where marriage is celebrated properly by people who understand what commitment actually means. I understand, he repeated, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I believed he might actually mean it. October 15th dawned crisp and clear, with golden autumn light streaming through the windows of Meadowbrook Manor. As I stood in the bridal suite helping Sarah with her final preparations, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. A year ago, this date was supposed to mark Marcus and Destiny's wedding. Instead, it would celebrate my son's marriage to a woman who embodied everything I'd hoped to find in a daughter-in-law. Ruby, Sarah said as I fastened her grandmother's pearl necklace, I need you to know something. Having our wedding here, at your venue, means everything to Jerome and me. Not because of the luxury or the beauty, though it's both, but because of what this place represents now. What's that, sweetheart? Second chances, new beginnings. The idea that something broken can be rebuilt into something even stronger. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back carefully. That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said about this place. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock in the garden, with the reception to follow in the ballroom. As guests began arriving, I positioned myself in the main foyer to greet everyone personally, a tradition I'd established for all weddings at the manor. At 3:30, Marcus arrived. He looked older than I remembered, grayer around the temples, more stooped in the shoulders. He wore a dark suit I didn't recognize and carried himself with the careful dignity of a man who knew he was walking on thin ice. Ruby, he said quietly when he reached me, thank you for allowing me to be here. You're Jerome's father, I replied simply. You belong here. We stood there for a moment, two people who had once shared everything now connected only by the children we'd raised together. The venue is beautiful, he said, looking around at the elegant decor. You've done something remarkable here. Yes, I agreed. I have. He nodded and moved on to find his seat. understanding that this brief exchange was all the reconciliation he would receive. The ceremony itself was perfect. Jerome, handsome in his tuxedo, waited at the altar with tears in his eyes as Sarah walked down the aisle. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, promising not just love but partnership, not just romance but respect. As I watched my son slide the wedding ring onto Sarah's finger, I felt a profound sense of completion. This was what marriage was supposed to look like. Two people who understood the weight of their promises, surrounded by family and friends who supported their commitment. During the reception, Marcus approached me once more, this time with tears in his eyes. "Ruby, I need to say something to you." I waited. Watching Jerome and Sarah today, seeing the way they look at each other, the way they've prepared for this marriage, it made me realize what I threw away with us. Not just the years, but the foundation we'd built, the partnership we'd created. I studied his face, looking for manipulation or self-pity, but found only genuine regret. "I'm sorry," he continued, "not just for the affair, but for taking you for granted, for treating our marriage like it was guaranteed instead of something precious that needed to be protected." "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means something to hear it." "Is there any chance?" "No," I said gently but firmly. "There isn't. What we had is over, Marcus. But what we created, our children, their values, their understanding of commitment, that will last forever." He nodded, accepting the finality of my words. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, I stood in the empty ballroom surrounded by the remnants of a perfect celebration. This was what I'd built from the ashes of my broken marriage, a place where real love was celebrated, where commitment was honored, where families gathered to witness the beginning of new chapters. The final divorce settlement was a masterpiece of legal strategy that left Marcus with exactly what he'd contributed to our marriage after his betrayal was factored in: almost nothing. Sharon had outdone herself. The house remained mine, obviously, since it had always been in my name. The retirement accounts were split, but with a significant portion awarded to me as compensation for his financial misconduct. Marcus would receive $89,000 of our retirement savings, barely enough to start over at 58. The court was particularly impressed by the evidence of dissipation, Sharon explained as we reviewed the final documents. $47,000 spent on an extramarital affair, plus the hidden credit card debt. Judge Morrison called it unconscionable financial betrayal. Marcus would also be responsible for repaying the $23,000 in secret credit card debt, plus my legal fees, which had reached $18,000. In total, his affair had cost him over $100,000 in assets and obligations. "What about alimony?" I asked. "Given his financial misconduct, the court awarded you temporary alimony of $1,200 per month for 2 years. Essentially, he'll be paying you to recover from the marriage he destroyed." The final irony was perfect. Marcus would be working to support the woman he'd betrayed, while living on a budget smaller than what he'd spent on his mistress in 8 months. I signed the papers with a steady hand, officially ending our marriage and beginning my life as a single woman for the first time in 4 decades. That evening, I called my children to share the news. Their reactions were exactly what I'd hoped for. "Mama," Denise said, "you got everything you deserved and more. I'm so proud of how you handled this whole situation." Jerome asked about my financial security. "Are you going to be okay money-wise?" "Baby, I'm going to be more than okay. Between the house, my retirement accounts, and the wedding venue business, I'm actually wealthier now than I was during the marriage." Marcia was more direct. "Good. I hope Daddy learned his lesson about treating people like they're disposable." But the most satisfying call came from Robert Hartwell. Ruby, I've been looking at our booking calendar, and something interesting has happened since we implemented the new moral standards screening. What's that? We're getting higher quality clients, couples who appreciate our commitment to traditional values, who understand that marriage is a serious commitment, and they're willing to pay premium prices for a venue that shares their values. Our revenue was actually increasing, despite, or perhaps because of, our selective booking policy. There's something else, Robert continued. We've been contacted by 3 other wedding venues in the area. They want to know about our screening process, how we're marketing the traditional values angle. I think we might have accidentally started a trend. I smiled, settling back in my new chair in my newly decorated bedroom. Robert, I think this is just the beginning. That night, I looked around my transformed house, new furniture, fresh paint, family photos that no longer included Marcus, and realized something profound. I wasn't rebuilding my old life. I was building a completely new one. 6 months later, I stood before a crowd of 300 women at the Reclaim Your Power conference, preparing to tell my story. But this time, it wasn't about revenge or heartbreak. It was about transformation. My name is Ruby Washington, I began, and I'm here to tell you that your life isn't over until you decide it's over. The audience was diverse: women in their 30s recovering from devastating divorces, women in their 50s reinventing themselves, women in their 70s proving that age is just a number. They all had one thing in common. They'd been told they were finished, and they'd refused to believe it. 3 years ago, I discovered that my husband of 43 years was having an affair. I was 68 years old, financially dependent, socially isolated, and convinced that my best years were behind me. I was wrong about everything except the affair. I told them about the discovery, the gaslighting, the financial theft. I told them about the legal battles, the venue purchase, the transformation of my life from victim to entrepreneur. But most importantly, I told them about the internal journey, the process of rediscovering who I was beneath 43 years of being someone's wife. The venue was never really about revenge, I explained. It was about reclaiming my power. Every contract I signed, every policy I implemented, every boundary I enforced was a declaration that I was still here, still capable, still valuable. The business had continued to thrive beyond my wildest expectations. We now had a waiting list extending 2 years into the future, and I'd been approached by investors wanting to franchise the concept. 3 other venues in Michigan had adopted our screening and counseling model. But the real measure of success wasn't financial, it was personal. In the past year, I'd traveled to Europe for the first time, learned to paint watercolors, taken ballroom dancing lessons, and yes, I'd begun dating Dr. David Richardson, a history professor who appreciated my independence. The most important lesson I learned, I continued, is that betrayal isn't about what someone did to you. It's about what you choose to do next. You can let it define you, or you can let it refine you. During the Q&A session afterward, a woman in her late 50s raised her hand. Mrs. Washington, my husband left me for his secretary after 28 years of marriage. I'm terrified that it's too late for me to start over. How do you find the courage to rebuild when everything feels hopeless? I looked at her earnest face, recognizing the fear and desperation I'd once felt myself. Honey, I said, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action in spite of fear. You don't need to feel brave to start rebuilding. You just need to take the first step, then the next one, then the next one. Eventually, you'll look back and realize you've traveled further than you ever thought possible. After the conference, I drove back to Meadowbrook Manor for a final consultation of the day. The couple, both doctors in their early 30s, had completed our entire premarital program and were scheduled to marry in the garden in September. As I walked through the venue, checking details for upcoming events, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed. The woman who'd been served divorce papers at her own birthday party now owned multiple successful businesses. The woman who'd felt invisible and disposable was now sought after for speaking engagements and book deals. But perhaps the most profound change was internal. I no longer defined myself by what I'd lost or what had been done to me. I defined myself by what I'd built, what I'd accomplished, what I'd overcome. That evening, David and I had dinner at a new restaurant downtown, something I did regularly now, without worrying about the cost or seeking anyone's permission. We talked about literature, travel plans, and the classes we were taking together at the community college. Ruby, he said as we shared dessert, I have something to ask you. My heart skipped, wondering if this was leading toward a proposal, but instead, he pulled out a brochure for a Mediterranean cruise. I was thinking we could take this trip next spring. 3 weeks, 7 countries. What do you think? I looked at the colorful photographs of ancient ruins and azure waters, destinations I dreamed of visiting during my marriage, but never thought I'd see. I think it sounds perfect, I said. As we walked back to my car, the new Cadillac I'd bought myself for my 70th birthday, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. From betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur, from financial dependent to independent woman, from victim to victor. The story that had begun with humiliation and heartbreak had transformed into something I never could have imagined, a second chance at happiness, built entirely on my own terms. A week later, I received a letter that would have broken my heart 2 years earlier, but now simply confirmed what I'd already suspected about the man I'd once loved. The return address was unfamiliar, a men's halfway house in Grand Rapids, but the handwriting was unmistakably Marcus's careful script. Dear Ruby, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I've been hearing through Jerome about your continued success with the venue, and I'm genuinely glad that you've built something meaningful from what started as our shared tragedy. I'm writing because I owe you more than the apology I gave you at Jerome's wedding. I owe you the truth about what really happened during our marriage and what's happened to me since. The affair with Destiny wasn't my first betrayal. There were others, not physical affairs, but emotional ones. I was slowly eroding our marriage long before Destiny came along. I also understand now that what I felt for Destiny wasn't love. It was addiction. Addiction to feeling young, desirable, important. She made me feel like the man I thought I should be, rather than accepting the man I actually was. You loved who I was. She loved who I pretended to be. After our divorce, Destiny and I tried to make it work. But without the thrill of secrecy and the financial cushion of your money, our relationship collapsed quickly. She left me for a lawyer at her firm, someone closer to her age who could actually afford to support her lifestyle. I've spent the last year in therapy, trying to understand why I threw away the best thing in my life for something that was never real. I'm currently living in a halfway house and working 2 jobs to pay my obligations. It's humbling work, but honest work. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or to try to win you back. I understand that what I destroyed can't be rebuilt. I'm writing because you deserve to know that your strength in leaving me and rebuilding your life saved us both. You freed yourself from a marriage that was slowly dying, and you forced me to confront truths about myself I might never have faced otherwise. Jerome tells me you're happy now, that you found someone who appreciates your intelligence and independence. I'm genuinely glad for you. You deserve to be with someone who sees your worth and never takes it for granted. With respect and genuine regret, Marcus. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because it represented the final chapter of a story that had taken me years to understand. Marcus was right about one thing. Our marriage had been slowly dying long before destiny arrived. But unlike him, I'd been committed to trying to revive what we'd built rather than replacing it with something easier. The irony was that his betrayal had forced me to rebuild not just my life, but myself. The woman I'd become was stronger, more confident, more independent than the woman who'd discovered his affair 3 years ago. In trying to destroy me, he'd actually liberated me. 2 years after I bought Meadowbrook Manor out of spite, I stood in my garden with my granddaughter Keisha, watching her play with Jerome and Sarah's twins, my great-grandchildren, born 6 months after their parents' perfect wedding at my venue. Grandma Ruby, Keisha said, now 22 and working as my marketing assistant. I've been thinking about your story, about everything that happened with Granddad. I waited, curious where her young mind was taking this. You know what's crazy? He thought he was getting rid of you, replacing you with someone younger and prettier. But instead, he turned you into this whole other person, someone stronger and more successful than you ever were before. I smiled, watching Tyler chase butterflies through the roses I'd planted after the divorce. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he hadn't cheated? If you just stayed married? I considered her question seriously. I probably would have stayed exactly who I was, a loyal wife who made herself smaller so her husband could feel bigger. I would have died never knowing what I was truly capable of. So, in a weird way, you should thank him? I laughed, a rich sound that carried across the garden. I wouldn't go that far, but I will say this. Sometimes life has to break you down completely before you can rebuild yourself the right way. That evening, as I prepared for bed in my beautiful bedroom with its view of the garden, I reflected on the unexpected turns my life had taken. The venue business was thriving, expanding to include 3 locations across Michigan. I'd written a book about financial empowerment for women over 60. I traveled regularly, spoke at conferences, and had built a life so full and rich that my old existence seemed like a black and white movie compared to the technicolor reality I now inhabited. The best part wasn't the money or the success, or even the recognition. The best part was the profound peace that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was worth. No one could take that from me again. Not a cheating husband, not a younger woman, not anyone. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I'd used to plan my comeback 3 years ago, and wrote my final entry. Today marks 3 years since I discovered Marcus's affair. 3 years since I thought my life was over. I'm writing this from my own home, in my own bed, in a life I built entirely with my own hands and my own choices. The woman who found those text messages in the dark of a Tuesday night could never have imagined the woman I've become. She was afraid, broken, convinced her best days were behind her. This woman, the one writing these words, owns a multi-million-dollar business, has traveled the world, fallen in love again, and most importantly, learned that she is enough, more than enough. Marcus wanted to replace me with someone younger, prettier, more compliant. Instead, he forced me to replace myself with someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more powerful. Some people say that getting older means your options shrink, that your life gets smaller. They're wrong. At 71 years old, I'm just getting started. To any woman reading this who thinks it's too late to start over, who believes she's too old to fight back, who's been told she should accept less than she deserves, you're wrong. Your story isn't over until you decide it's over. And mine? Mine is just beginning. I closed the notebook and placed it in my desk drawer next to Marcus's letter. Tomorrow, I would start planning the next chapter, whatever that might bring. At 71 years old, I was finally living the life I'd been meant to live all along. The best was yet to come.